But you actually have to define it. You cannot just let people guess. Don't have the same definition of strategy that you
Mhm.
do. You are going to fail.
My guest this week is Mark Nitz, and we're going to chat about strategy and its little identity crisis that it's going
This
through.
is Leadership Sound Bites. Real leaders, real moments, real growth.
Welcome to this week's episode of Leadership Sound Bites with a very special guest who he and I have been in the room a lot lately. It feels like hot seat coaching through the resilience community. Mark Nitz, founder of Clearsight Strategy, and a very, I'm going to say, evolved thinker, which it's not a bad thing. Not a bad
I
thing.
just, yeah, that's a new one for me. So yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It's when I think about you, I think about the learning that I have from you, from the depth of the thinking and the research that you've done about the topic, right?
Mhm.
Whether it's a word, whether it's whatever it may be. And I'm in awe of that because I myself do not always do a lot of prep. I go by more feeling of
Okay.
things and how
Mhm.
they make me feel to know whether or not
Mhm.
there's a hidden meaning, a different meaning.
Mhm.
That's not your practice typically. And so I have a
Mhm.
lot of respect for that. And I've learned new terms that I had no idea, geospatial being one of those, that I actually needed to know, right, in my
Mhm.
life.
Mhm.
So you picked our topic, which I think is timely for the beginning of this 2026 year.
Definitely,
You want
yes.
to, and you've had a lot of posts on LinkedIn about it recently.
Mhm.
So would you like to share it?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks again for inviting me onto the podcast again. And I do really appreciate the kudos and all the opportunity to chat with you and chat with others, especially on resilience community about all these things.
Yeah.
And uh, so I love philosophy, and that was my first undergraduate experience was philosophy, and in part because I was trying to find my way, but also because
Mhm.
I discovered in the course of that uh, my desire to know why on everything. I know, when you're two, you're like, oh, why? I never did any of that. And math teachers hated me because I was like, why? Why is that the rule? They didn't have
Who
answers.
made that
And so philosophy, I really enjoy uh, the way in which it calls the philosopher to engage their mind, and
up?
whether that's understanding what knowledge means, or whether it's understanding or trying to resolve a semantic issue. Are the words we're using correct? That that more intense uh, thinking, the more intense conceptual analysis, I just really enjoy. And you're mentioning your mention of that emotional response. For me, that goes along with it. Like, I love thinking. I really enjoy it. It feels like fun to me. So,
Yeah,
yeah, that's just kind of how my brain was built.
I get excited over spreadsheets too. So I
Oh
mean,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's just one of those things that people go, really? And I'm like, I love assembling it, putting it together, getting something to where it's easy to
Mhm.
understand from the messy, whatever. It's like, oh, everything has a place now. Yeah.
Yeah, yep, yep. And it's categorical.
Yep.
And it so happens that good philosophers understand the categorical piece too, that actually uh, segues nicely into the strategy, or really the strategic problem. Because the strategic problem isn't a matter of you need to change your strategy. It's a matter of understanding what strategy means in the first place.
Okay.
And I think that is really important because uh, when properly understood, strategy is about strategy is a cognitive function. Strategy is about thinking. It's about how you think about your business. It's about how you think about your market. It's about how you think about your customers. and there is a lot of intelligence consumption, from like if you think
Hmm.
about military intelligence and the spy movies you've watched, there's a lot of without nefarious intent, of course, there's a lot of intelligence consumption that goes into that strategists seek
So
out.
strategy you're defining as a verb is what I'm hearing, right? Instead of a
Mhm.
noun, which is an artifact.
Right. Yep. And glad you used that word because philosophers love the word artifact. Hmm.
See why I
Because
love
that's
being in the room with you?
yeah, and I really enjoy just chatting with you too, Michelle. It's great. Um, the idea that strategy is a product or a plan or a model or a workflow misses the concept of strategy. I want to be really clear that that does not mean that those things are not important.
Hmm.
They are as important as having strategy as having kind of call it strategy as a role or a
Hmm.
position within a company. They're as important as that because nothing happens without those things, without plans, without workflows,
Well,
models.
you can't communicate. I mean, you're not able
Right.
to let me just say you can communicate. You can't effectively communicate without, I mean, you can
Yep.
still communicate,
Yep.
but you may
But
not get the results
right.
that you're striving for.
Right. And I want to be clear about that because there are obviously there are dissenting opinions out there, some of which have come my direction.
Really? No, no
And
kidding. Is that because the posts that you've been putting
oh
out there?
yeah. Yeah, which
Does that
I'm
spark conversation and opinion and perspectives?
I wish it would, and I wish it would because I think, you know, I want to learn a bit more about some of the details of what people think about the demarcation between strategy, planning, tactics, methods, operations, because I think those are all they're all very important, but B,
Hmm.
I think we confuse things when we start to call stuff strategic. Uh, and I'd like to know more about their perspective, just so that I
Hmm.
can better communicate where my position on what strategy really
So,
is.
so here's the question that is just going on in my head right now is why does it matter? So in my
Mhm.
mind, you're seeing a problem with current state that doesn't contain, represent, have elements of what you're talking about that's critical.
Mhm.
Um, what problem are you seeing? And maybe that's a really great place to
Mhm.
start.
Mhm. Mhm. Yep. I think, and actually, I'll answer that by starting with my opinion of the history of the business use of the term strategy. I think the use of the term for business purposes started with, very was very well intentioned,
Hmm.
and that the belief is that good strategy equals good or better results. The challenge is that we can't define or describe strategy at this point in time. We can't define strategy without talking about planning and operations and tactics and saying that that is strategy. And it's in part because business metrics are so heavily relied upon. And so, like, essentially, a metric within business is what you need in order to know something.
Well, yeah, know the condition of the something.
Right.
Yeah.
And without that, it's kind of, people, I think people would argue that it's,
Well,
vague
how do you
or
know? I mean, how do
obscure
you know?
or,
Why would you even, again, I'm going to go back to strategy is meant to close a gap, solve a problem, however you want to say it.
Mhm.
And if you don't have measurements associated with that, you don't know the magnitude of the gap, the problem, the whatever it is. And so if you don't know that, how do you know whether or not it will be successful,
Mhm.
right? How do you measure that?
Mhm.
So there needs to be some, and typically strategies, your measurement is going to be at the macro level,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
you got to have something that you're measuring against.
Mhm.
So it is
And
it is
yep,
critical.
yep. And I think that's where the knowledge of the history of the term matters. Because if you start to dig deep, you discover that it's much older than most business people are aware of. The,
Hmm.
the the incorporation of it into business is fairly new, but the Greek word strategos or strategios is easily 1,000 years old.
So what was it originally meant for? Because my brain goes to, Mark, there's been a lot that's changed in the last 1,000 years.
Yeah.
And I can imagine
Mhm.
that the origination of the word, people have reappropriated it to
Mhm.
be something else to serve whatever needs they may have today.
Yes. Yep. And I think in some cases that capturing of a term, essentially adjusting or changing its meaning can be useful
Mm-hmm.
and isn't really it doesn't end up damaging the process, or it doesn't end up damaging. In fact, it can help the result. In the case of strategy, not so much, because everything has become strategic, and that's not the entirety of the argument. But if you have strategic communications, you have strategic marketing, you have strategic planning, you have strategic finance, and these are all things you see all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
What of any of those things is actually strategic?
I wonder if people mean, because when you're saying that thing, um, I think humans typically tend to want to connect themselves to the things that matter. So if I think about an organization and I go back to Toyota um, production system, management system, it was Hoshin
Hmm.
Conry. And
Hmm.
that is the implementation of strategy. It's the back and forth negotiation between targets, timelines, and resources, of what can we change to be able to support what this is. Um,
Hmm.
but that being said, when you talk about marketing, there could just be marketing, which to me could be like just throw it out there, right? This
Hmm.
broad net
Hmm.
that's not
Hmm.
necessarily focused, if you will.
Hmm.
And it could be that people using those terms ahead of those functions in a business are connecting it back to, we're doing this stuff in support of this particular thing, our strategy for this
Hmm.
year. We're not just doing the same thing we always did.
Right.
We're going to
Yep.
do this stuff that's acutely aligned to what our strategy is this year, to where we're
Hmm.
going to do strategic marketing. We're going to be,
Hmm.
and in my head, I think about, it's the thin slice. It's very focused. It's aligned to what's
Hmm.
going on. It's not the gunshot, right?
Right. Yep.
That's my thinking.
Hmm. Yep. And if I were to ask a similar question, but instead of using the word strategy, use objective based, would I get the same answer?
You know what the difference that just happened in my brain, okay, but between
Hmm.
those two things, and it's only because my understanding of things,
Hmm.
um, there are a bunch of objectives involved in an organization strategy. So when I hear objective based, it can be at different levels in the organization.
Hmm.
I think of a more finite piece of the
Hmm.
whole
Hmm.
versus when I think of strategy, I'm thinking this is the mothership,
Hmm.
right? For the most part, that's where my
Hmm.
brain goes. At the highest level, the org, this is where we're at, and then you've got all these other pieces that fit underneath.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's where my brain goes.
Okay. So in that case, let's shift the question a little bit more. And what if I were to ask the question in terms of expectations instead of strategy?
What do you mean?
Are your communications, your marketing, your finance, your planning, are those those focused on expectations?
I don't know if the word focus fits.
Okay.
If you don't have expectations, and then I can't say expectations without outcomes or visible things or behaviors or whatever. But
Mhm.
if I don't have expectations of doing something, why am I doing it? And how do
Mhm.
I know whether or not it is working, right?
Mhm.
I can
Mhm.
have expectations of leaders in a role. I can have marketing, for example. My expectation
Mhm.
of marketing, and this is a very, very generic thing, is that it works,
Mhm.
right? So if it
Right. Mhm.
works, it means it's aligned to and associated with some other goal that we have
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
close some gap.
Mhm. Mhm. And is it possible to talk about all of those things in that way, aligning uh, this function like marketing with communications to assure that goals are achieved, such as we bring in more clients, we bring in 10% more clients this year than we had last year, and that of those 10%, we retain 5% more than we retained the previous year.
Mm-hmm.
And I can say all that without using the word strategy.
Yeah, I mean, those are our goals for the year. Yeah.
Mhm.
But
Yep.
the strategy is more, it's like the how and the where. Because in my mind, when I think about it, it's we're gonna have goals. We want to be
Mhm.
10%, we want to be whatever it is.
Mhm.
And then you've got to have a strategy that determines where are we playing,
Mhm.
at what level are we playing, and so all the things like SWOT analysis and everything else come into it, which by the
Mhm.
way is a painfully heavy word term.
Mhm.
Um, but it's
Mhm.
it's all that stuff that I think comes into it. Yeah, we can say things like that without saying strategy, but I think a lot of times people connect to why they're doing this
Mhm.
thing. Well, it's part of our strategy
Right.
because marketing's typically not, let me think what I'm saying to you. Marketing is typically not, and it should be, it's not typically not routinely all the time at the table where a lot of those discussions are happening at
Mhm.
the top of the house
Mhm.
strategy level. There, and the
Mhm.
same thing with communication. They're usually tagged later because some people have this idea that, well, we don't need them until further downstream.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, which is a very myopic view.
So the question that flows from that is, since we used how and where, can how would you describe the planning for a year or for 2 years in a business?
You could do long term if you're not using strategy.
Hmm.
You got
But
short
I
term
mean,
and
I
long term.
mean, but I mean, describe it, like if we define planning for the business, what's the planning about? What's the process that we go through?
Planning for me concerns the implementation of the thing,
Hmm.
right? It's like, okay, this is what we want to achieve. Here's where we're going to play. Here's what we're thinking and stuff. And now we've got to figure out what are those steps that we're going to take? What are the
Hmm.
changes that we need to make? Who are the people we're going to engage in?
Hmm.
That's when I get more, I'm going to say tactical for lack of a
Hmm.
better word.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
because I need to plan to implement.
Hmm. And use methods, right? And
Oh,
specific
everything. There's
function,
the tools, there's the methods,
specific
there's the
functions
humans,
and
there's the work
capabilities,
groups,
right?
yeah, that's when
Yep.
the resources just go through the
Hmm.
roof.
And among those are things like, how are we going to communicate this goal? How are we going to,
Well, and
which
so
methods are we going to employ to
that stuff should
bring
have been
our
happening.
clients?
That stuff should have been happening before. And that's why I go back to what I loved about a lean management system, right? Or
Hmm.
Toyota's thing is you had Hoshin Connery where you had that dialogue between levels of leadership before everyone goes, this is what we're doing and here's by when. And then you roll it out and people go, how could
Hmm.
we possibly?
Hmm. Hmm.
You need to have that dialogue because leaders at the top of the house the majority of the time, I'm not going to make this absolute statement, don't have the visibility or the let me just say this differently, the complete understanding of what the next level down is up against. They have an idea, but they're not in the day-to-day, nor could they possibly be in the day-to-day or be expected to be in the day-to-day. But that's where that catch-ball process, to where here's what we're thinking, it's this much by when and whatever, and they're going, okay, well, with what we've currently got going, we can't do that by then because of this, which is where the conversation is: timelines, targets, and resources.
Sure.
We can do this much by this, or we can do this much by this further out, but we got to be able to push them, or we're going to hire people, or we're going to stop doing whatever. But that negotiation, those conversations, a lot of times don't happen until after it's been decided and the board already knows. And then we start communicating to the rest of the organization. And I think that's a bigger opportunity people have. But so I think part of the strategy is those discussions to where, what are we equipped to do? What are we able to do? What do we stop doing? What's actually happening in this, vehicle, or, entity, if you will, that's the business.
And so you used a really important term in describing that, because you brought up vision, and you not in terms of what am I daydreaming about the future, but rather in terms of, is an executive able to actually see all of the details that are happening, right? And this is an important distinction, I think, because whether it's planning, communication, and I've got a whole suite of professional capabilities that I discuss under my 7 hats. Includes the planning and the operations and the finance and the safety and the communications, and all of which are equally important.
And change management, by the way, is woven into that.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Doing all that, but go ahead.
Yep. And to bring it back to the question about the origin of strategy, is that all of those things have already been couched in a decision that was about strategy, or that was strategy, and that was, which game are we going to play? And to make sure that it is really, really clear about why that decision results in functions, methods, planning, systems, processes, all things that are actually not strategic, is that the decision is about whether or not you have the capabilities and the desire to influence the future using football, golf, accounting, natural resource development, or sailing ships.
Oh, wow. You have an interesting array of options.
Right. Is there something happening that you want to influence and change? If the answer is yes, you're still firmly in the realm of strategy. Do you have the capability to sail a ship to do it? Well, as you start to remove options because you aren't capable, you find one of those immoral, you determine that you don't have enough people to field a football team.
Golf balls are too small. You can't see them in the snow.
Right?
All the stuff. Yeah.
Hey, we've got 7 people here. They can all handle something the size of a basketball. Let's play basketball. Now you've shifted into non-strategic, but very goal-oriented, mission-oriented functioning.
Because you landed on, in this example that you gave, where basketball would be an interesting strategy to understand what your goal is, or what actually gap you're trying to close. But but at the point that you land on that thing, but the thing is, there was a lot of activity that happened to land on that thing. That landing on that thing didn't happen in a silo. And that's where it's like there's back and forth. There's, in lean management system, it's catchball that, they go back and forth and talk about. That happens. That it's like, where are we feeling? What's a bit space? What is our goal? do we actually want to be the best basketball team that never played basketball before, right? I mean, if
Right.
that's your
Yep.
goal, then
Mhm.
okay, let's go.
Yep.
But I think a
Yep.
lot of it depends on that too. What does success look like?
Mhm. Mhm.
And then your strategy can
And
support that success.
and here's why it really matters that we separate, not really separate in terms of other people aren't allowed to engage in strategy, but rather that we identify talents, capabilities, desires, et cetera, to lead towards those goals or that ultimate mission. And that is it, because of time,
Yeah,
the world is always changing, the markets are always changing. What if we get to a point where playing basketball doesn't make sense anymore?
right.
That's strategy.
Well, it is. I mean, it's and
And
I had a conversation with a leader about that. It's
mhm,
like the space that they were playing in
mhm,
worked until it didn't anymore.
right.
And
Yep.
so it's like you look at to go, okay, this thing that we're playing in this space with, is it still a quality thing?
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm,
The
yep.
organization made a decision, we're not going to invest anymore in this quality thing. We're not going to make it better. We're not going to make it cutting edge. We're not going to make, okay, so what space do you play in now?
Mhm,
It's a
yep.
different strategy.
The evaluation of whether or not to continue to play in that space is the strategy.
Yes.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
and if it's not that space, what is the space if we're going
Mhm,
to continue with this
yep.
thing?
Yep.
So I'm going to go back to the original question because I'm curious, because part of it can be people could push back going, what does it matter? I mean, if we're still doing all the
Mhm,
stuff, right?
yep. Mhm,
If we're still deciding this thing, if we're still communicating and rolling stuff out, we're moving forward, what does it matter? What does it matter if I tell you that
yep.
your blue shirt is really aqua? Or it's just a kind of a,
Yeah.
sky white,
Mhm,
right? What does it
mhm,
matter?
mhm. Yeah.
So
So
what's the problem?
the reason that that's a problem is that planning that includes methods, functions, specific options for tactics,
Hmm.
the points, the decisive points at which uh, someone can change their mind and say, "Ooh, we should probably go with Plan B instead of Plan A."
Hmm.
Uh, oh, we need to take a piece of Plan A and add it to Plan C, and that's going to work even better. Uh, those functions are mission or goal oriented, and the the fact that we've quote unquote strategized them confuses things because A, not everybody knows really what strategy means. Uh,
Hmm.
and B, it has been so overused that we now use it in place of terms like method. So
Hmm.
if you have you have, oh, I've got 7 different marketing strategies. No, you probably have 7 different methods.
Hmm.
Because again, a strategy, if you argue that a plan is about uh, objectives and that laying out what you can do, and strategic planning is about or strategy is about things like the how and the where, uh,
Hmm.
then when someone says I have this handful of marketing strategies, what they do is they lay out a plan and call it a
Hmm.
strategy. All they're doing
Hmm.
is pointing at it, saying that's a
So
strategy.
here's my question. I hear you. I hear you because
Mhm.
the like I mentioned in the beginning, you are one of the deeper thinkers that I've like ever come across, which I highly value and appreciate. I do not go as deep as you on that. Um, but there's also the word that's coming to mind for me is at some level a purist, right?
Mhm.
Because you're going back to the origins of the word. So for me, the question would be is as it's almost like, do you ever write longhand cursive?
Mhm.
Did you learn to do
Mhm.
that?
Oh
Okay, I
yeah.
don't know if they're in teaching at school anymore.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, I was born
I
in the
would
70s, so.
yeah, I would probably like drive people nuts as
Mhm.
some other people, is that I don't print and I don't write
Mhm.
cursive. Mine is a
Mhm.
blend.
Yep. Yep.
And even my signature is sort of a blend of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. So is mine.
And I feel like that's, oh, there you go. Yeah.
I still
So
take all my notes by hand. So yeah.
I do too, but most people can't read them because it is a blend. Um, but what I feel like, Mark, here is that it's muddied the waters,
Mm-hmm.
or it's created this hybrid
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
of the word. And so I can hear you in that, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm still wondering what's the so what in that?
Good.
If the people that are in it using the terms understand that it's not that, it's this, even though the
Mm-hmm.
term is the same, right?
Yep.
I'm just doing this.
Mm-hmm.
I know that if I do this, it's not going to change this up here, right? I'm not changing
Mm-hmm.
this up here. What does it
Mm-hmm.
matter?
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts?
So yes, excellent question. And as my strategy series goes on here in the next few weeks, we're going to dig a little deeper into this, and that is that uh, no, this is not actually a fundamentalist play by me in terms of, strategy must be this and everything else must be that. Because there is crossover, it turns out. And so I'm gonna, now people probably aren't gonna listen to the last two
No.
podcasts in the strategy series, but because uh, in the modern day, we actually want that ability to think as a strategist to filter down to everybody,
Mm-hmm.
right? Not just filter down, but we want everybody to be as aware as they possibly can about everything that's happening around them
Mm-hmm.
and why they're making a choice to use plan A instead of plan B,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's the true modern strategic nature of things. So it does come back to, yes, you can in fact have strategic marketing as
Mm-hmm.
long as you're not just calling your marketing plans strategies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that does muddy the waters. It does confuse things because we're talking about we're simply applying a word without thinking about what it means. And if we're talking about strategic marketing in terms of, I understand what's happening with my competitors, I understand what's
Mm-hmm.
happening within the organization, and I understand that if we send out a particular set of brochures, that will influence the market, then you are thinking strategically.
Mm-hmm.
How you do it isn't the strategy.
Mm-mm.
The how you
Yeah.
do it is the plan or the next.
Well, you know what just hit me when you were talking, right? It's one of the things that when I come, I go back to what's the so what? Why does it matter?
Mhm, mhm,
It could matter because it could be confusing for people if they're in an organization and strategy is used over and over at a number of levels in the org, and people don't understand where the hierarchy, for lack of a
mhm,
better word,
mhm.
exists,
Yep.
right? So it's like, is marketing over this other strategy, or is this strategy? So
Mhm, mhm.
who's at the top of the pile?
Yep. Mhm, mhm.
To say, okay, this is the thing we're actually trying to align up to and support. Because
Right.
for me,
Mhm,
strategy has always been the what.
mhm,
The how in organizations is, how is marketing going to support that strategy? How is communications going to
mhm,
support
mhm,
that strategy? How is ops going to be able to support that strategy? How is HR going to support the strategy?
mhm,
Uh, but if you've muddied the waters on strategy, people could get, I'm not saying it's happening. Um, I'm confused is too strong of a word, but they could not be clear
mhm. It's
on
yeah.
the pecking order, or the order in which we actually are trying to align to
Mhm,
things, right? So
mhm,
if I'm somehow supporting marketing in some way, and I don't have visibility or recognition to know that marketing is just supporting the organization strategy. And I don't look at the organizational strategy, I just look at marketing. I may not be in the best position to support marketing the way they need to be supported, or to give them feedback to say, hey guys, you're kind of off course a little bit. If I'm not looking up here and know to look up here, because a lot of times people in the organization don't understand why they're doing what they're doing.
Right. Yep. Yep. And that understanding of why, again, philosopher, but everybody has some innate desire to know why. It may not be nearly as deep as others, definitely probably not as deep for everybody as for a philosopher, but the why matters. And so, yes, it is possible for that strategy, that idea of understanding why decisions were made or are being made around competition within a market, like, and we can come back to Kodak in just a moment, but the other piece.
Blockbuster's another one. You can go there too.
Yep. Yep. And the other piece of why it matters so much that strategy be recognized as something that needs to be clear is that our terminology within business determines how people act. And it is just fine for a business to define strategy and strategic as, interbusiness unit awareness plus market awareness equals you make decisions based on what you know about those things. Okay, great. But you actually have to define it. You cannot just let people guess. Staff in business don't have the same definition of strategy that you do. You are going to fail at all of these.
Well, and it goes back to this. Don't ever assume a shared meaning, okay,
Right. Yep.
of anything. I mean, even like, oh, I want to be successful. Oh yeah, me too. What does it mean? What does success mean to you? What does success mean to me? And a lot of times with these words that we hear all the time, the word is not unfamiliar.
Right.
We assume a shared meaning more times than not, because we're looking to find things that we don't know about to make meaning or sense of them, not the things that we already think we know. Already know that. I already found that. Well, that's great. What does it mean to you?
Yep. And
so I agree. I agree with you. The other thing I'll say is that it's not just why we're doing it, the reason it's connected to our mission. This is all the stuff, because that's going to engage the hearts of people. But it's also just freaking having visibility to it. And understanding at whatever level of the organization you're at, what does that mean for me? And how do me and the team that I'm on contribute to it? Because that's the thing that we kind of miss cascading down in organizations. And it's not for lack of the leader that you might report to. They may not know. So I think it's, as we cascade stuff down, create the space so people can ask questions about it. What does this mean? Why are we doing this? What does this mean for my team? Does this mean, create the space to where if leaders don't know how that they can communicate to their team, feel free to ask. I really don't know how I'm going to engage my team on what's going on.
Yep. And that, knowing that is like just having that awareness is strategy. Again, just getting back to the core of it, and why I think that at least starting with the fundamental understanding really matters is that, many millennia ago, or hundreds of years ago, 1,000 years ago, strategy was a position. It was actually an elected position within a government, not something that people did. So there was a person or a group of people engaged in making moral decisions. Is the situation such that we should consider, taking our army with its spears and its, shields and what have you over to the border, and okay, bring that to the strategist. We need to consider the moral implications, what's going to happen 10 years from now in our relationship with that country, right? The results of that are what yielded planning communication or
Mm-hmm.
planning, operations, etc. Uh, at that time, yes, there was this demarcation. Again, I
Mm-hmm.
don't think in the modern day there is or really should be, as long as we know that strategy is more like a mindset. And I'm stressing that because it's not a function. Like it's not something that yields an artifact. It's not something that you have that has an object associated with it that you can point to and say, that's the strategy we used last year. That's a plan if you're pointing to it and saying that's what we did last year. Strategy is adaptive because
Mm-hmm.
the market is always
But you
changing.
should still be able to communicate how you did it, how you
And
arrived at it.
well, and yes, you can track that
So
knowledge
there's a
knowledge of the
process.
history.
There's a yeah.
And I think that's critical too, is that you can track the history of your decisions or the history really of your how you came to, but you have to
Mm-hmm.
have a really robust knowledge management function within your business. If you do and you do it right, then yes, you can point back and say, hey, here's the history of this
Mm-hmm.
business strategy. But you're not going to be able to point back at a set of steps that were taken and say that was a strategy because that's confusing to what a plan was or is.
Well, for me, you could look back on it and say, here's how we do strategy. Here's how we strategize. Here's how we come together and do. I mean, because we have frameworks for coming together to arrive at and do the thinking within the stuff. Because we have to be able to educate people on what is it to do it,
And I
to
think there,
develop it,
yeah,
to create it. I mean, you've got. I mean, we did it with teams all the time and different
mhm,
ways that you can do it.
mhm.
Um,
the the caution that I would have about that is that again, that's already rooted in the decision to play on this particular field. And if what you're doing is going back and looking at, here's how we did X, here's how we achieved this objective, that was putting together.
no, different animal, different animal. This would be like, Mark, that you go in and work with leadership teams to
Mhm,
do strategy.
mhm,
Okay.
mhm,
It's like we're going to get together. You're going to think about this. We're going to do that. I mean, there is a process, if you will, to
mhm.
doing
Oh,
strategy.
okay, yeah, I
And
see, yeah.
and
Mhm,
yeah, and there
mhm,
are when we look back on it, within that thinking, we're going to identify we made some assumptions. Here are the inputs and the knowledge that we had
yep,
at the time.
mhm,
So
mhm,
that's the kind of stuff that can be knowledge that's
mhm.
saved to where, a year down the road, someone comes back and goes, what the frick were you thinking?
Mhm.
Why would you
Yep.
even do this?
Yes. Yes.
Let's
Yep.
go back. And so here are the
Mhm.
things that, at the time, it's like AI, right? Came
Mhm.
onto the scene. You had a bunch of people because it was like underground for the most of the world, right?
Mhm.
Except a
Mhm.
few people go up to us
Mhm.
back in the 50s. We had AI. What?
Mhm.
What?
Yep. Machine
Where was
learning.
it?
Yep. Yep.
Underground, and then it
Mhm.
surfaces. Like
Mhm.
it's almost like these people that go, "Oh my God, they're an overnight success."
Mhm.
No,
Mhm.
they've been
Mhm.
underground
Mhm.
doing this stuff forever, and then it popped up. Well,
Mhm.
if you weren't aware of it before it surfaced,
Mhm.
and you did this 3-year strategy,
Mhm.
and you just started it, not unbeknownst to you, there's probably some stuff that's going to change, especially if you're in
Mhm.
the tech world or
Mhm.
you're in something that, is ripe for being automated or using this technology. I guarantee you, your strategy could change if what you currently do is at risk.
And I would say that you're strategizing by being aware that you need to change.
But the
And yes,
original
yes,
one, the
absolutely.
original thinking that you had in the strategizing that you did, it would, to use your point as a verb, it would be a trigger for your
Mhm.
need to go back.
Yes. Yep. And that's the knowledge management piece for sure. Yeah. And if
Yeah.
you, yeah, you're absolutely right. If you are keeping that, if you have good company history, you can look back at the history and say, here's what influenced how our
Hmm.
business is built. And so understanding that is part of strategy, especially at the executive level, because you
Mm-hmm.
need to know why you decided to make
Mm-hmm.
cookies instead of tortillas,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or
Because the
to
kid
do
down the
both.
street likes him.
Right.
Yeah.
And in order to remain competitive, you can't go back and think like you did yesterday,
Mm-mm.
right? And
No.
if you think like you did last year, then all you're doing is rehashing a plan. You're basically saying we're going to template this plan and call it strategy, and it's not really meaningful because we're not assessing our knowledge of the environment in which we're operating.
Mm-hmm.
We're not making judgment-based decisions. And AI
Mm-hmm.
is a great uh, uh, example of how things can get severely disrupted. Even deciding whether or not to use AI in some
Mm-hmm.
business is something that the strategists are involved in because they want to assess, is this, moral, legal, ethical?
Mm-hmm.
What are the constraints on it? And if we put constraints on it, how does that influence our future? Should
Mm-hmm.
we even do this?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
once that is handed to the decision makers, we start to form plans that involve operations and methods, tactics and functions, and equipment. And the strategist or strategists monitor that. They continue to take in information, and they
Mm-hmm.
may adjust their opinion, and that can adjust how
Mm-hmm.
decisions are made. Yeah, so there's history to it, absolutely. And yes,
Mm-hmm.
you absolutely can look back at the
Mm-hmm.
the
Yeah.
the the formal history. Uh, my caution for most, especially kind of mid-sized, those mid-tier businesses, is A, create a dictionary for your business. Use
A
those,
lexicon. Yeah.
yeah, use those terms very specifically for very specific purposes. Teach everybody what they mean.
Mm-hmm.
But thing number two, don't get in the habit of referring to plans that were intended to achieve objectives or intended to achieve business goals. Don't tie metrics to strategy. Strategy is not something that is measurable. Strategy helps determine what you want to measure.
Strategy can also be the the way that you want to accomplish, because a lot of times, Mark, the measurement comes before the strategy.
Is it, or is that a plan or an operation or method?
No, I think when I think about it, you have organizations that go, we need to be at this level.
Mm-hmm.
There's no strategy around that at this point.
That is the strategy.
That is a goal. That's a goal. I mean, there's a lot of times that stuff gets thrown out there to go. And when I say
Mhm.
level, I'm usually talking about EBITDA or market share or
Mhm,
whatever.
mhm, mhm,
Um, that to me is not a strategy, it's an aspiration.
mhm.
Strategy requires more thinking.
Okay, so you're not talking about we daydream about being the largest business selling PVC pipe. You're talking about we want to
That's a vision.
enter into a market.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Strategy is
Yeah.
like
And you're
there's
right. That is,
thinking
yeah.
involved
Mhm.
in that. Otherwise, like, we're going to be the best in the world. That's not a strategy. That's an
That's part of
aspirational
strategy though.
goal.
Mhm.
I agree, but it's
Mhm.
not strategy in and of itself. It's an
Not
aspirational
on
goal.
its own. Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I would not use the term goal personally.
Okay. What would you
In that.
use?
I would say it's aspirational.
Yeah. It's
It's
an aspirational what? What would you finish that off with?
it doesn't need a modifier.
Really? You would just say that thing they did it and they say we're going to be the best in the world, and you're
Yeah.
just going to say that's
Mhm.
aspirational.
Yeah, because it doesn't need to be an adverb. The same is true of
Okay.
strategy. Strategy doesn't need to be an adverb.
Okay. See, this is why.
That's again, this is my opinion.
No, and
But-
I appreciate that.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of areas that I am not equipped to counter or, share another thing. I'm just going to
Mhm.
go, okay then.
Yeah, you're asking good questions though, and I think the way in which you're proceeding through this with me is what I think a lot of business professionals do, and how they think, which is really important for me because I'm learning from this too
Mm-hmm.
about okay, how to tackle the question of goal, objective, mission relative to what do we know about what's happening right now in the world
Mm-hmm.
that will help us decide whether or not to even take those on.
Right. And the other part of it too is whether or not at the end of the day that clarification is actually going to change anything,
Hmm.
because sometimes it won't, right? It
Hmm.
just won't matter. And it's just not the thing to spend effort and resource on.
Hmm.
So that's why I go back to what problem or gap do you see beyond
Hmm.
the, we've made this so vanilla and generic
Hmm.
that it's being used, and it's like, okay, so it's being used in other ways that, historically wasn't. Why does that matter?
Hmm.
And so the one thing I did here is for people to understand the hierarchy of, what is the thing we're actually aligning to, right? What is the
Hmm.
thinking of all this
Hmm.
stuff?
Yep.
Who are the people that are coming together? Because I think that stuff matters. So,
Hmm.
um,
Absolutely.
what else would you add as we close out, sir? As a comment on what we've chatted about, and I so appreciate the time.
Yeah, I think the final, I guess the conclusion really is that in no way should my opinion detract from the importance and value of planning and operations
Hmm.
and the methods used to create, either new things or new value, strategy as a overarching concept for engaging in human judgment about achieving those things
Hmm.
is really the bottom line, that it helps to clarify within your business, whoever you are, whatever business you work in, it helps to clarify what you mean by that.
Hmm.
And my guidance and my opinion would be to shift away from it being a replacement for words like method, function, plan, and more towards awareness of what's happening and awareness of why this company succeeds, why it needs to continue to succeed,
Hmm.
and the information that your staff want to seek out because they want to understand better why what they do matters. That
Hmm.
that absolutely works. But again, if you want to use it as, strategic planning, strategic marketing, strategic communication, just make sure you define it.
Hmm.
Because if those staff members don't have a definition, like you said, they're going to rely on their assumptions and they're
Hmm.
going to rely on what they think they know. And I think that is the reason that so many businesses run into problems when it comes to either their strategic initiatives or their strategic objectives or whatever it is. We've got a strategic initiative for IT implementation of X, Y, and Z, and oh, it didn't, it failed, and it's because that word, like you said, muddies the waters. It creates ambiguity, and the expectations that all the assumptions about what it means are correct
Hmm.
can't possibly be true. So you have 100 different minds trying to do something different for different reasons because you haven't defined what your business is going to
Hmm.
use as the definition for strategy.
It could unintentionally elevate the importance um, of other things that are happening. And when you're looking at trying to prioritize things, it can muddy the waters. The additional comment that I would make on all that stuff, because there is a lesson in not assuming a shared meaning on stuff.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, don't ever assume a shared
Hmm.
meaning on stuff.
Yep.
And when you're in an organization, realize that the humans that have come together to work together as a team may have a common understanding about how they do a job, right?
Hmm.
The function that they're doing, they went to school, they were learned out of, taught
Hmm.
out of certain books, education, if you will. But that's not the extent of their exposure in learning and development. So even if you said, well, I've already told them once, that is one time out of the 5 to 7 that every adult learner needs to hear before it sinks in. It bears repeating. So make sure that you can ground people in the common definition of terms and words and what it means before you get everyone in different boats and having them rowing in different directions.
Yep.
So yeah. And I think that's with everything and not just strategy.
Yep.
Welcome
And
to
that's the heart
2026,
of,
sir.
yeah, and that's the heart of the strategic problem is, you know,
Yeah.
it's that strategic is put everywhere and not well understood.
Yeah, no. I appreciate it. Always great to be in the room with you. Leadership Sound Bites with Mark and Michelle. Please like, share, subscribe. And if you want to get controversial or interact with Mark, I'm gonna put stuff how to get a hold of him in the description. But he's on LinkedIn posting about this stuff, people. So you'll be able to comment then.
Yes.
So anyway, thank you, sir. Have a great
Thanks.
one, and I look forward to next time.